Hey, Discern listeners, 90-Day Fiancé, let's watch. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. By the way, if you ever see anyone impersonating me, reach out to us through email. If you comment below, I might not necessarily see it. There are impersonators of various different content providers on YouTube, on all the social medias. So if you ever suspect that it's an impersonator, it probably is. And so you want to reach out because I probably don't know about it, and then I can flag it and try to get it removed. You know, be careful out there. Let's watch.
We were fortunate. We had a great upbringing until I was about a senior in high school when my mom and dad, divorced.
I think that your mom did a very good job. I don't know your dad, and I know there's some resentment there, but it seemed like he provided well.
He did, and I've forgiven my dad. Like, I'm at peace with it.
Okay, so we're getting a little bit more detail about Ed's childhood. He says that they had a good family and he was raised well, and then his parents went through a divorce when he was a senior in high school. Okay, I imagine there's more nuance there, because there's always more nuance there. I've never met a single family that didn't have nuances, if you will, that didn't have some issues. It's just impossible for any two people to be in a relationship, particularly if it's multiple people, and there not to be some issues where there's conflict, misunderstanding, hurt feelings. And the thing that I always tell my students, because one of the main courses that I teach, and the very first course that I taught as a professor and have taught consistently throughout my 25 years as being a professor, is what we call Family of Origin Systems. And it's a course that originally was an elective, but then became mandatory, and then became mandatory for first quarter students because of how important it was. In that it's important for trainees, people who want to become therapists, to get to know their issues, to get to know their relational traumas, to get to know their relational patterns. And when they get to know that, then it allows them to explore their countertransference, their reactivity to their clients, their triggers. And it also is a wonderful way to learn about childhood development and systems development, so that they can apply those awarenesses and those models of thinking to their clients, right? So it helps to build self-awareness for the therapist, and also gives them knowledge and education around how to apply theory to a client. They're just applying it to themselves and to their parents. And so there's always a group of students, maybe one or two. My classes tend to be, at Antioch, in graduate school, classes tend to be small. So anywhere from, at the top end, 25, but typically the largest classes I'm teaching are 16, and often my classes have 10. There are other classes that are designed to have 8 max, and sometimes there's only 4 people in that class. Anyway, so there's always a few students that will say something along the lines of, well, I was raised well, so I don't know what to, because the assignments involve them reflecting on and applying theory to the issues that were present in their families. And there will be some students that will say something like, well, I don't really have, because they'll hear other students who have been through a lot of traumas and are very aware of that, and will talk about how they're going to write in their papers or work on their assignments about this trauma that they went through, or this very difficult experience that was ongoing in their family. And these other students will be hearing that and saying like, well, I don't really have stories like that, so I don't know what to write about in this class. And they'll say, hey, I don't, or they'll email me because they'll feel bad that they come from a good family. There's always that kind of thing as well. Sometimes I have that because I did come from a relatively well-functioning family. Not that my family didn't have issues. It did, believe me, and I have mine as a result of that to some extent. But on average, in general, my family was extremely stable. My parents are still together. They're coming up on their 60th anniversary. They almost never fought. They were there for us. My parents didn't hurt us, didn't abuse us. My parents never used alcohol or drugs or anything. My parents occasionally would have a couple drinks, maybe like once every 5 years or something, just to be social or something. I did see anyway, point is that not that parents can't drink and be good parents. I'm just saying that it was very wholesome, and the worst thing that could happen in my family is if someone used a swear word, like one time I was upset with my sister. My older sister kind of was also a parent to me in some ways, and she was annoying me somehow. She was right, I'm sure of it. And I'm like, I don't know, 10 or something, and she's 17, and I'm stomping downstairs, going to my room, going like, and then I said F you. I said, the word, but I thought I said it under my breath so she couldn't hear it. And she said, I heard that. And and my parents were coming home in a few hours, and I just sat in my room just sweating bullets thinking, oh my God, when my parents find out that I said that, I'm going to be in big trouble. I don't know what's going to happen, but oh no. And, looking back, my parents, they never really punished me. They were just, they just give me a lecture or something. But I was grounded, I think, once. Anyway, point is that when I talk to the students, the thing that I'll say is we were all left in the crib alone. Now, some kids don't have cribs, especially these days, which, there's pros and cons, of course. But the point is that when we were 6 months old, a year old, all of us woke up from a nap or woke up in the middle of the night and our parents weren't there. Or our parents had to put us down so they could go to the bathroom or talk on the phone or something. And we all had that experience. We all had that experience where our parents left us with the babysitter or left us in daycare or left us in preschool, and we felt abandoned, and it was hard for us. And that's very, very difficult for kids to go through. And it's not that you're not supposed to do that. It's just that life presents situations where there's going to be issues. There's going to be moments where, as a child, you're going to feel very, very hurt and very, very upset, very angry, very sad. And there's just no way around it. And as a result of that, you have to, as a child, develop ways of coping with that. And our ways of coping with that, defense mechanisms, personality traits, personality disorder, spectrums, mental health illnesses, if you will, are often a product of that. And so anyway, Ed is saying that his childhood is fine. And what I would surmise is that there's a lot more nuance to that. We've seen a little bit with the mom that raises some questions. I mean, they're currently not even talking to each other because of things that I don't think, at least on the surface, really justifies that. I think he's contributing to it, obviously.
Did your dad pass here in Arkansas?
Yes. I mean, my dad was a great guy, but he got into a crowd where all he would do was party, and my mom didn't want anything to do with that. So my mom ended up divorcing my dad and packing up all of her stuff and moving to California.
All right, so we just heard a tiny little detail about the dad, according to his narrative, Ed's narrative about it, which is, I'm guessing, through his filter or what he's heard from his mom or whatever. But he's saying that his dad, when Ed was a teenager, was out partying a lot. And his mom didn't want to deal with that, so they got divorced, and then she moved the family to San Diego. And Ed didn't get to see his dad as much anymore, is, I think, the implication. And it sounds like the dad died a while back. But anyway, so who knows? But given Ed's personality, given the mom's personality, Ed doesn't seem to be following personality-wise in the mom's footsteps. Hard to know exactly, but the way that Ed presents is arrogance. When he's pushed into a corner and he feels attacked and hurt, like think of that time when Liz was upset about the photography interaction with Liz's friend Alex. I think that's her name. Ed was coming across to Liz as very dismissive, very talking down to her, that kind of thing. And where did he get that from? Usually we get that sort of behavior and that impulse from our parents. The mom doesn't seem to really exhibit that. So if the dad did, which is a huge speculation, and we match that up with dad out partying all the time, again, I'll tell you the way that I think as a therapist, that when I hear this clinically from clients, but even sometimes from friends, honestly, because sometimes I'll hear stuff from friends and I'll just want to kind of figure things out, not to invade my clients' lives, but I don't know, just out of curiosity sometimes. It'd sort of be like if you work on cars and your friend says, yeah, I have this problem with my car and I hear this knocking sound. If you're an auto mechanic, you're going to be like, well, are you losing, thrust or, I don't even, torque or power, I guess is probably a better term. There's probably a question there that an auto mechanic might ask, not because they're trying to fix it, but they're just kind of curious about it and maybe trying to help. But anyway, what I will hear from clients when they say things like this. So let's say that I had a presentation with Ed and Liz in office, and I started to note this defensive arrogance, or maybe even Liz would report that. Was the dad arrogant? Was the dad potentially narcissistic? I don't know. But one of the presentations of narcissistic personality spectrum is that the individual will want to have a flashy life, and will be out and about trying to impress people or something. I don't know. It's a long shot, of course. But so when I would have that thought, I'd be like, there would be a lot of questions, right? There would be a lot of assessment. It might take months, if not years. There are times when I'm working with couples and I'm always trying to figure out where the individuals came from in their family systems growing up. But we don't have a lot of time for that because we're dealing with conflict that happened that day or that week. So I don't have time to just luxuriate and ask a lot of questions about childhood and that kind of thing. Sometimes I do, but often I don't. So I'm usually piecing together things as we're going. And so that would just be a little bit of an indication. Well, I wonder, and I would assume that I am reading it wrong, because it's not often that I'll pick up on something like that and I'll be right about my assumption. But at the very least, it's an inroad down a pathway of exploration that would be fruitful for the client. So that's what I'm hearing right now.
The day after graduation, I followed my mom out to California, but I didn't like my dad after my parents' divorce. My dad passed away about 10 years ago, and my mom and I really started to depend on each other so much for emotional support.
Okay, so another thing we're hearing is that maybe Ed and the mom were enmeshed. There seemed to be some indications of that throughout the season. Hard to know. There's nothing wrong with depending on each other it sounds like he was around 17, 18, and his mom to depend on each other. There's nothing pathological about that. We should be able to depend on our family members. But, it could be an indication of parentification or enmeshment. And again, even if that happened, it's not necessarily highly destructive, but it's just something I know. But then we're also hearing that for Ed, after the divorce, he really didn't like his dad and kind of cut himself off from his dad. I don't know, but it's possible that Ed was more on the fence, but the mom really wanted to cut off from him because she was really hurt. Divorce will have to do that. We also have to figure, well, she moved halfway across the country, so there was probably some level of like, I never want to see that guy again. I don't know. And then Ed's like, okay, I'm going to side with my mom. And I'm also hearing a lot of stories from her because she's oversharing with me about what she's going through. And so I'm going to reject my dad. And this is another thing that families will pass down. This is one of the easiest things we can actually teach when it comes to transgenerational patterns and systems, which is what we call cutoff. When you cut off, some family systems have a mechanism available because of previous generations have taught them that this is available, is that when in doubt, you cut off. And we've seen that with Ed, his daughter, and Ed's mom, right? Because right now, Ed is cut off from his daughter and from his mom. And in the past, him and his daughter were cut off as well when Ed was with Rose, right? So there's this pattern potentially that goes way back, maybe even back to his grandparents and great-grandparents, where when there's conflict, you just cut off. You're just like, you're done. And sometimes that's functional, but sometimes people will use that as a way of trying to communicate something. They're trying to say, hey, I don't want to cut off from you, but I want to tell you that you can't do that. And so I'm going to cut off from you, hoping that that'll change your behavior, and then we can re-engage, right? That's not really a functional way of trying to communicate something, right?
It's kind of weird being here where we grew up, and I'm not even talking to my mom right now. I want to tell you when I went to high school. Bentonville High School. So I haven't been back here, maybe, in like 40 years. I only went on 2 dates in junior high and high school total. Once I was in college, I met my ex-wife.
Okay, so we're learning that, and I think we had a little bit of detail on this, but we're getting more, that he had been on 2 dates up until college, and then in college, he meets his wife and the mother of the child, right? His adult child. And then they got a divorce, and he cheated on her, right? Am I remembering that right? Or she cheated on him, or they cheated on each other. I know I should be writing this down. There was some sort of infidelity, and then from the sound of it, he just completely cut off from dating. So that's interesting, actually. I mean, I guess we kind of knew that, but to get that specificness to it, that it sounds like with Rose, it's possible that if we just took the amount of dating that Ed had in his life, and I've been talking about this before with regards to Liz, is that if you had heard from someone like a friend, it's just like, okay, forget how old this person is. You don't know how old they are. They've been on 2 dates when they were in, one date when they're in middle school and junior high, and 1 date when they're in high school, and that's it. The relationship never went beyond that 1 date, and so you think, okay, you went like to the movies or you went to dinner or something, and then that was it. I mean, that's barely a relationship, right? And then at some point, this individual meets someone, falls in love, gets married, has a kid, has a lot of turmoil, gets divorced pretty quickly, and then the next person they date is Rose, right? You would think, well, this individual, Ed, has almost no experience when it comes to dating, has almost no experience, is essentially like a teenager when it comes to the emotions and the awareness and the ethics and the differentiation and the back and forth, Like, as another way of looking at this, if you heard about someone who was 16 who was in a relationship and was fairly self-centered and made some poor decisions, like obscured the fact that they didn't want to have kids, but might have led their partner on to believe that they did, we might say, well, that's not great, but they're a kid, they're 16, they're still figuring it out. They'll learn from their mistakes. Well, that's essentially where Ed is. It doesn't excuse it by any means, but it does contextualize it, right? So there's a possibility that, well, what I would say is for Ed is that he has issues seemingly, and compounding his problem is that he lacks the experience to navigate his issues and the situation such that he doesn't harm other people along the way. Not that his issues would go away. So say he did have a lot of experience, I'm guessing he would still have half the problem because of his personality issues seemingly, but I think it's furthered by the fact that he just has no experience, right? I mean, just think about ourselves when we were 15, 16 and we were dating or were in our second long-term relationship. Just think about all the ridiculousness that we engaged in mentally and behaviorally, emotionally. At least I hope you have that, because in all likelihood what that means is that you can reflect on yourself a little bit. There are people that believe they're never the problem, right? And that's kind of a problem.
First girl I was ever with. Then I met Liz, my first really serious relationship after my ex-wife. So for me to share...
Wait, what? So he's done this before where it's just complete erasure of Rose. Like there was his ex-wife 30 years ago, and then there's Liz. It's like there was we saw it. Now, he can frame his relationship with Rose however he wants to, but I wonder what that's about.
My past with Liz and open up like this, it's a pretty big deal. Wow, this is crazy.
So was high school?
High school it was a little better than junior high, and elementary I was teased and bullied. Kids would call me no-neck. Bullies stopped when I realized I could make people laugh, and I kind of just became class clown.
All right, pretty classic story. So he's being bullied throughout elementary and junior high. He said high school's a little better, but that sounds like it was still rough. And he developed this ability to be the class clown as a way of trying to deflect. And that definitely fits with his personality, right? So what that forces people to do when they're in it, there's a lot of ways of dealing with being bullied, a lot of ways with dealing with being harmed by your peers, abused really by your peers. And one of the ways is to become the class clown. And for some people they're like, oh, well, that's a strength, right? You're funny and you're getting positive attention. Well, but there's things you have to give up. And you have to endure a lot of abuse up until the point that you actually develop that skill. And the thing you give up is yourself. You might even make jokes about yourself, right? And so you're being harmed, and then you're like, okay, I'm trying to show that I don't like this. I'm trying to fix this through normal avenues, but no one seems to care. I might have even signaled the teachers or my parents, and no one's coming to my rescue. No one's going to help me. I'm alone on this, or I'm wrong, or there is something defective, or I am ugly. There is something wrong with my neck, or something like that. I just have to accept that. That's just who I am. And that does seem to match up with the schemas that I think he suffers from. I have talked about this before, that I think deep down he believes that no one really will love him for who he is. He has to act like something else, right? So he develops this persona of the class clown. On the inside, he's crying and he feels alone, but on the outside, he's happy and everything's fine and nothing affects him. But deep down, of course, right? He would be deeply affected by that. And the only way I can get people to like me is if I act like I'm something else, right? Which sounds like something Ed has had his whole life. There's a fair amount of that in his presentation, both with Rose and with Liz.
How about you? Did you experience bullying?
No, I didn't experience bullying, but I didn't have a lot of friends, though.
So you didn't... Come here, buddies.
Okay, so we're hearing from Liz, her narrative is that she wasn't bullied, but she didn't have a lot of friends. So I wonder what that means exactly. Like, she was a loner. What, did she move around a lot? I forget. Did we learn about that? Sometimes kids who, because I think Liz came from a chaotic family growing up, they will feel ostracized because they can't relate to anything. There comes a point, if you come from a family like that, where you look around, you might even go to a friend's house and go like, oh my goodness, wait, so your dad just comes home and has dinner with you and isn't drinking all the time and doesn't like throw people down the stairs? Or your mom is just kind of like lets you do things without yelling. So you'll notice like, wow, I thought my family was normal, but my family is not normal. And one of the ways that kids will deal with that is they'll feel ashamed and then they will isolate. And they don't want to get close to other people because they don't want to reveal how shameful they are and how shameful their family is. There's also an isolating element of, usually with kids, you reciprocate. You invite someone over and then you go over to their house, right? You go back. Well, it can kind of throw a wrench in that system when people invite you, but you never invite them over to your house, right? So then they stop inviting you over and then you don't have any friends. And so you're isolated in that way. I don't know if that's the case for Liz, though.
I didn't really have anyone to hang out with.
Yeah. I did do sports, though. I mean, I was...
Okay, well, that's even more severe, right? I didn't like have anyone that I could hang out with. Like, no one. I didn't have any friends. I had people I knew when I was growing up, but I didn't have friends that I hung out with. Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder what's going on there.
Come on, baby.
I got some puppies.
Okay, that's enough.
You want to run? You want to run? I'm taking an interest in Ed's childhood stories and upbringing. I'm understanding a lot of his personality now, but I definitely feel like this trip is making me feel closer to him. Your high school kiss right here.
Maybe I'll get some stinky pinky.
Ed and I are really good when it's just the two of us.
Is that going to be a meme? I'm always wondering what's going to be memed. I won't even repeat it. I've never even heard that one before. I feel like I've heard a lot of things as a dude. I was in a fraternity. I played a lot of sports with a lot of dudes who say various things. I'm still friends with a lot of those kinds of guys. I feel like I've heard, I'm always astonished at how few slang words my wife knows. I'll say something, she'll be like, what's that? I'll be like, well, it's... And so I thought I'd heard it all, but I never heard that one before. Is that an Arkansas thing? All right, well, I want to thank you for liking this video or any of my videos or subscribing. That's cool of you. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.